Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at how to write equations and use those equations to solve problems. So first I want you to pause your video and write down these steps, how to solve word problems. So the way we solve word problems, first we read the question and we identify the variable. Typically this is what the question is asking for, but not always. So your variable is your unknown. Next, we write an equation using that variable to model the situation. Third, we solve the equation just as we've learned to do. And lastly, number 4, we use that answer to answer, or we use the solution to the equation to answer that question. So let's practice this. Number 1, first I'm going to read it to identify the variable. 12 less than the quotient of a number and 7 is negative 2. Find the number. So it's asking us to find a number. So the variable that I want to use, I'm going to use n since it's talking about a number. Next, I'm going to use the information, my key words and numbers to write the equation. 12 less than the quotient of a number and 7 is negative 2. So here's what I see. 12 less than the quotient of a number and 7 is negative 2. So 12 less than means it's minus 12, but less than means to flip it. The quotient of a number and 7, remember quotient means to divide, so the quotient of a number and 7 is signals equals negative 2. So now I've written my equation. N divided by 7 minus 12 equals negative 2. Step 3, we're going to solve the equation. So these are our steps that we have used so far this year. And the only thing I see that I need to do is isolate the variable. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The opposite of minus 12 is to add 12 to both sides. So I'm left with n divided by 7 equals negative 2 plus 12 is 10. And I still need to multiply by 7 on both sides to isolate that n. So n equals, and 10 times 7 is 70. And lastly, answer the question. So find the number. I'm going to write a sentence. The number is 70. So in this case, the actual solution to the equation was my answer to the question. So let's try a few more. Number 2, first I'm going to read it and see what variable I need to use. Mo is thinking of a number. 11 more than 1/3 of the number is negative 1. Find Mo's number. So again, this is talking about a number, so I'm going to use the variable n. And I forgot to do this in the last one, but we want to tell or write what it represents. So n equals Mo's number. So we've identified our variable. Step 2 is write an equation to model the situation. So let's look for keywords and numbers. Mo is thinking of a number, nothing there. 11 more than 1/3 of the number is negative 1. 11 more than means to subtract 11 but flip it. 1/3 of the number, remember we have 2 ways to write that, but I'm going to write it this way. I like things simple and neat. Is signals the equal sign, negative 1. So n divided by 3 minus 11 equals negative 1. Step 3 says to solve the equation. So let's do what we know how to do. And again, this one, it just looks like I need to use inverse operations to isolate the variable. So I'm going to add 11 to both sides. So I have n divided by 3 equals negative 1 plus 11 is 10. I still need to multiply by 3 on both sides to isolate that n. So n equals 10 times 3 is 30. And my final step is to answer the question. So the question says find Mo's number. So Mo's number is 11. Number 3. So let's read it to identify the variable. The sum of the measures of the 4 angles of a quadrilateral is 360 degrees. Find the measure of the angle labeled x. Well, they were nice and they went ahead and gave us the variable. So x is going to equal the degrees in an angle, or in that specific angle. So next I'm going to write an equation. So it looks to me, it says the sum of the measures of the 4 angles is 360 degrees. So I'm going to add all of these angles. I've got 2/5 x plus x plus 30 plus x plus 3/5 x. Is 360 is signals equals, and it's 360 degrees. Step 3 is to solve our equation. Now, typically I would multiply everything by 5 to get rid of these denominators, but I want you to see something. If I add 2/5 x and 3/5 x, oh, hold on just a second. So just a reminder, we go through our steps. I don't see the distributive property. I do see like terms. So on the left-hand side, I see 2/5 x plus x plus x plus 3/5 x. And those are all the like terms on the left-hand side. So as I was saying, typically I would try to get rid of that fraction, but watch what happens. What is 3/5 x plus 2/5 x? That's 5/5, which is 1x plus 1 is 2 plus 1 more is 3x. So we want to make sure that we're working smarter and not harder when we're doing our math. So I've got 3x plus 30 equals 360. And now to isolate that variable, I just need to do inverse operations now. So I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides, and I'm left with 3 times x equals 360 minus 30 is 330. And I do still need to divide both sides by 3 to get x equals 110. So now let's use that solution to answer our question. The question says, find the measure of the angle labeled x. So the angle measures 110 degrees. That's the answer to my question. Now, what if it had asked for any of the other angles? Well, you would just take your value of x and plug it in. So, for example, if they had asked for, let's use a different color. Let's use green. What if they had asked for the measure of the angle that equals x plus 30? Well, I would take the x, which was 110, that's what we found, add 30, and that answer would be 140 degrees. So that's another option, but in this case, the actual value of x answered my question. Number 4. So first, let's read this with the purpose of identifying our variable. Write an equation and solve for x if the area of the rectangle is 70 square units. They gave us the x. So if I'm talking about, it looks like the side lengths, what does x represent? It's just going to equal length. It's going to equal some length that's used in that rectangle. So now let's write an equation. That's our next step. So it says write an equation and solve for x if the area of the rectangle is 70 square units. Well, when you were in 4th, 5th, maybe 6th grade, didn't we learn that to find the area of a rectangle, we do length times width? So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to do 7 times x plus 4, see, length times width, And what did it say that was? Well, it said that the area is 70 square units. Now, I like my letters on the left, so I'm going to flip this to do my next step, which is to solve the equation. So I'm going to flip that. First step, I clearly see the distributive property. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got 7 times x and 7 times 4. So 7 times 1x is 7x. 7 times 4 is plus or positive 28 equals 70. And now it just looks like I need to isolate that variable using opposite or inverse operations. So first I'm going to subtract 28 from both sides. And I get 7x equals, well, 70 take away 28 is 42. I still need to isolate that x by dividing by 7. So x equals 42 divided by 7 is 6. So that's the solution. Let's see if we've answered our question with that solution. Write an equation and solve for x if the area, yes, we have. So all they asked for was to solve for x. So that is the answer to your question. Number 5. First, I'm going to find the variable. The length of a rectangle is 3 centimeters less than 4 times the width. The perimeter is 114 centimeters. Find the width. So for this, I'm going to use W as my variable, and that's going to represent the width of the rectangle. That's just what makes sense to me here. Now, since we're talking about rectangles, to help me write my equation, which is the next step, I'm going to sketch a rectangle. It just helps me if I draw pictures. So let's look for keywords. The length of a rectangle is, 3 centimeters less than 4 times the width. So here's our width. Our length, which is here, is 3 centimeters less than, so that means minus, but you flip it, so minus 3, 4 times the width. So 4W minus 3 is going to be our width. The perimeter is 114 centimeters. Find the width. So let's talk about this. What does perimeter mean? So again, going back to what I know, perimeter just means the distance around. So that means this width is also here, and this length is also here. So let's use that to write our equation. You have a couple of options, but I'm going to use the distributive property like this. I have 2 W's and I have 2 of the 4W minus 3's. And then it says the perimeter is 114. So I've identified my variable, I've written my equation, now I'm going to solve my equation. So first I notice that I do have the distributive property. So I've got 2W plus 2 times 4W is 8W. Sorry about that. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, and that equals 114. My next step, do I have like terms? Yes, I do. On the left-hand side, I have 2W and 8W, which becomes 10W minus 6 equals 114. And now it's down to just a 2-step equation, so I'm going to isolate using opposites. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I'm left with 10W equals 120. I'm going to divide both sides by 10. Still isolating that variable, and W equals 12. And lastly, let's use that solution to answer our question. The question says find the width, so the width is 12 what? Well, in this problem we used centimeters, so the width is 12 centimeters. And let's try one final example. First, let's identify our variable. Decreasing negative 5 times a number by 18 is equal to decreasing 9 times a number by 25. What is the number? So since we're talking about a number, Again, I'm going to use n for some number. Okay, next I'm going to find keywords to write my equation. So decreasing -5 times a number by 18 is equal to decreasing 9 times a number by 25. So let's start. I clearly saw the is equal to, so I'm going to write that in there. Decreasing -5 times a number by 18, decreasing -5 times a number minus by 18 is equal to decreasing means subtract, 9 times a number by 25. So that's our equation. Next, I'm going to solve my equation. I don't see the distributive property. I don't see like terms on the left side or on the right side. So now I'm going to isolate the variable. But I notice I have letters on both sides, so I start with that. To move the 9 over, I'm going to subtract, 9n over, I'm going to subtract 9n from both sides. So I've got -14n minus 18 equals -25. Let's see if I can. And now I just need to isolate the variable by doing inverse or opposites. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides. And that becomes -14n equals. And so my signs are different. So I'm going to subtract. And I end up with -7. So now I'm going to divide both sides by -14. And n equals, well, same signs are positive, and I'm left with 7 over 14. But if you know how to simplify, both of these are divisible by 7. So n equals 1/2. So now let's answer our question. What is the number? The number is 1/2.